Welcome to Stories from the Center of the Universe, the podcast about the human experience.
Kate Chenery Tweedy, welcome to the Center of the Universe.
Well, thank you so much. Glad to be here.
We are trying to accomplish at least a couple of things in this discussion. One is we want to learn more about Secretariat for Virginia. Two, we want to learn more about you. I want to learn the whole story. I think Downtown Ashland Association also wants to know the whole story, but they also are equally interested, I believe, in Secretariat for Virginia as an organization and what they're all about and trying to accomplish. I should also mention that Silent Rob is here, and you and Silent Rob are related to each other.
We certainly are. His mother is a Chenery, and my mother is a Chenery, and I think our great-grandparents were brothers. Yeah. Yep.
Okay. All right. So, and that makes you second cousins with his mom.
Yeah, something like that. Third cousins?
I think we figured out, yeah, our moms were second cousins.
Yes.
And we're third cousins.
Yeah.
Got it.
Exactly.
Makes sense. And it's funny, he's Silent Rob, but tonight he's not going to be silent.
No, because my cousin's here.
Yeah, right. I got to turn you up.
All right, bring it.
There it is. All right, perfect. All right, so tell us about Secretariat for Virginia, how it formed, what the idea is, what you guys are trying to accomplish.
Well, okay, Secretariat for Virginia is a kind of an ad hoc group of people who love Secretariat, and we rallied around the notion that he was born in Virginia, but there's really no monument to him or sort of place where fans can go to really celebrate him. I mean, there's his birthplace, but it's not open to the public all the time. And Jocelyn Russell, who did this magnificent statue of Secretariat that is in Lexington, Virginia, and we went and we saw it unveiled and it was beautiful. Well, she came to us and said, hey, guess what? I've got another edition of that statue, which I can change slightly, but I've been given authority to produce it and sell it, and would you like it? And she came to us and said, and we had helped her with the original one. She'd brought the original maquette, the small clay version, out, and we'd critiqued it and helped her with it, and she was doing all this great research, went up to see the jockey and talked to the vet and all that. So we were part of her research, and we saw how gorgeous it was. So when she came to us and said, hey, I've got another one, do you want it in Virginia? We just about flipped. So at that point, and when I say we, I'm talking about myself, my co-author Leanne Layden. Together we wrote the book Secretariat's Meadow, the Land, the Family, the Legend, which is really about, how this incredible horse came into our family and, how he was raised in Central Virginia, not the bluegrass of Kentucky. So Leanne and I had worked forever on celebrating Secretariat and, birthday parties and all kinds of fun things to help kind of bring fans to celebrate with their fans and keep the legacy alive. So, and then Wayne Dementi of Dementi Studios in Richmond was our publisher. He's done a lot of local history. So the three of us had been on what we call a journey of joyful destiny. That's kind of our nickname for 15 years. And ever since the book came out. And then when Jocelyn came and said, hey, I've got this statue, it's only going to be $550,000. We kind of went, oh my gosh.
Oh, just a tad over half a million.
Just $550,000. And Wayne had done fundraising. I never had. Leanne never had. And so but we thought, let's give it a try. So then we got a number of other people who were also interested to join forces and help us. And we've been on this journey ever since, and it's just been so much fun and so gratifying to see the reception in the community. So anyway, Secretariat for Virginia is here to bring the statue of Secretariat to Ashland. That's our goal. That's what we've been doing, and we're just having a blast doing it.
And you're either really close to the goal, or you've recently maybe exceeded it? We have
raised enough to buy it.
Okay.
So buying it is not the same as installing it. So but we have had like, for example, the Reynolds people of Reynolds Aluminum gave us $200,000. Well, their vision is to have a whole plaza, so that ups significantly the cost. So we don't yet know we're going to buy the statue and hand it over to the town. That much is now clear. Thank heavens. But it'll be a while before we have enough for all the expenses that are associated with, paving the plaza and creating the base of it and designing it and lighting and, signage, everything that goes into it. And then we want to have an educational component. We want to have some context, some history, all kinds of stuff. So, so we think we definitely are enough. We have enough to buy it. We're still fundraising to complete the project.
I imagine what you found is there are people that are immensely proud of the fact that Secretariat's from this part of the world.
Absolutely. And all the time I run across people who say, oh, when my Girl Scout troop went and we used to visit the Meadow, or somebody who says, well, my uncle delivered hay there, or somebody who says, yeah, I used to ride with Mr. Chenery. The roots are so deep, and people do have a lot of affection, and they knew about the Meadow, and they would drive by it on Route 30 and enjoy the green fields and knowing these great horses are there. I think I've learned that, and it's so gratifying to see how much affection there is.
Rob and I can't tell you the number of times I've said, yeah, I'm from where Secretariat's from. Mm-hmm. I probably said it a couple thousand times in my life.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Yeah.
And what kind of reaction do you get? Do people say, what?
If they're of a certain age,
yeah,
they're like, oh, really? I thought Secretariat was
Kentucky.
from Kentucky. People younger, they're like, who's Secretariat?
It's like, yeah, what are you talking about? Yeah. Horses? Huh? Yeah.
What do you do with horses?
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm fascinated. So town of Ashland, do we have a location? Because I think there was a preliminary. Okay.
We have a location. So the little kind of green pocket park that is, there's a big Randolph-Macon sign. It's the entrance to Randolph-Macon on the west side. So it is at the corner of England Street and the railroad tracks. It's right opposite Suzanne's, catty corner from the depot.
Right.
And on the other side of the street, catty corner from Iron Horse.
Right.
So it's a highly visible. It's kind of perfect. The statue is big, but that's a nice, rectangular site, and it'll be facing downtown, so that head toward the south. And we're gonna, it's gonna be paved, it's gonna be landscaped, there'll be benches, there'll be, donor signs, plaques, and it's a cool design. It's gonna be great. But yeah, we settled on that. It belongs to Randolph-Macon, but they are leasing it to the town for, some nominal fee. And then the town will own the statue, maintain it, So it's a joint project, really.
Will the Randolph-Macon sign stay?
Randolph-Macon sign will stay, but it'll be moved. They're going to redo that back wall.
Gotcha.
So we don't quite know how that'll look yet, and that's part of why we don't know how much we need.
Well,
ultimately.
So England Street, or what other people would refer to as 54.
54, exactly.
And the railroad tracks, that's the intersection.
It is the intersection.
In the town of Ashland, but not just the town of Ashland, in the center of the universe.
Yes.
So that statue will be at the main intersection in the center of the universe.
It's going to be in the center of the universe.
There you go. I mean, if you're wondering if there's an actual center to the center of the universe, there is.
That's it. And people can say, I'll meet you by the Secretariat statue.
Absolutely.
And what we love is, it's big, right? Life size and a half. So, and the pedestal won't be very high, the base. But it'll be high enough so that folks on Amtrak are going to ride by and they'll be almost eye level with him. And that's just going to be fun.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I think the funnest thing about that, you said he's going to face south. So
yeah.
If you're actually going through, then you're actually like you're going to be racing Secretariat.
I know. I know. It's so awesome. Fun.
Yeah. And Secretariat would win, I think.
I think he would.
Yeah.
These are not fast trains.
No, they're not. Well, they better not be through town.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Yeah, so
But he went about 40 miles an hour, which is for a horse
crazy.
Incredibly fast. Yeah.
And he was so smooth. But we'll talk more about Secretariat in a second.
Sure.
Jocelyn introduced us to this notion of life and a half.
Yes.
Secretariat was a giant horse.
He was.
Unbelievably big.
Yeah.
So relative to like a typical racehorse back in, let's just say the early to mid 70s, was he like 1.2 times the size of a typical?
Well, what's interesting is he wasn't, there certainly are horses as tall and a few taller. But what he had was this massive hindquarters and a deep chest, and he just, his girth had to be special ordered and he wasn't fat. This was not, excess.
Yeah.
This was just a really solid, powerful body. And he was so heavily muscled and beautifully muscled that he just looked bigger than he probably was. He just had that presence, and mom would say that he'd come out on the paddock where the walking ring where they sort of warm up before they get saddled before a race. And he would come out on the walking ring and sort of puff up and, to intimidate the other horses, frankly, and to kind of say, I'm the man, I am here, and I think the other horses would go, oh, yes, you are.
So where did you, I'm going to get into you growing up, but link it to Secretariat. And you were how old when he was born?
20.
You were 20 when he
ran.
When he ran, and he was a 2 or 3 year old when he ran.
He was a 3-year-old. Well, he started at 2, but the big races, the ones he's famous for, are 3-year-old races.
All right, so your mom was the first lady of horse racing.
Yes, she was.
And it's because she was the first owner of a prominent racehorse that happened to be female.
Well, there were other owners. There were some very prominent owners, but they weren't hands-on managers. They were sort of like, oh, yes, I own this horse. But she was there every day at the track. She would be up there at 5 a.m. for, dawn workouts. She was integral to every part of it and loved horses, knew horses well. It was just, they were a real team, the jockey, the trainer, and mom, and, of course, Secretariat. And so she was also such a voice for the horse and unlike most owners, here's the other deal, she welcomed the fans in, and she embraced them. She wanted to share with them the excitement and what a wonderful horse he was. And most owners didn't do that. They didn't unbend. They didn't act like the fans are part of the story. She always felt that, hey, if you love horses, we're the same, because I love horses too. And so she related to people on that level. And then the other reason she was known as that is afterwards, she became a leader in thoroughbred owners and breeders. She was a tireless advocate for horse racing and also for retired racehorses and for, she was very much against drugs. She was a real leader in the industry. So it wasn't just that she owned this great horse, but it was everything she did with that.
Yeah, the fact that she was thoughtful enough to include the fans and smart enough to include the fans, because I think that helps. I mean, really Secretary was still going to win those races the way he did, but it just the positive vibe it sounds like your mom created sounds amazing. Yeah,
well, and she really did. She wanted to share the story. It was such a great story. She wanted people to enjoy it, and they did, and they felt welcomed. I think
that's really cool. Let's go back to Secretariat for Virginia. The statue is in place. You've accomplished the primary objective for creating Secretariat for Virginia in the first place. What happens after?
Well, we really need to envision that because we didn't know we would raise enough money for there to be an after. But it from all, we have been, people are still coming forward, and we're still actively soliciting people who we know want to participate, who are community members. But so we feel like there will be enough to make a really beautiful plaza, and then to do something a little more educational, more, give it greater context. So it's not just a statue sitting in a corner. It's, there'll be, nice bronze plaques explaining the history. There'll be other cool things that, make it sort of interactive in a way. So all of that, I think, will take a life beyond the actual fundraising stage. And so we're just a loose group of folks who love the horse. We will probably morph into something maybe more structured after that, because right now we're just a subcommittee of the Ashley Museum. Ashley Museum, of which I'm on the board, is our 501c3 fiscal sponsor. So all donations are tax deductible because they go through the museum. But so if we went away, the museum would still be, it's still a project of them. So we don't have a legal structure of our own, but as long as there's interest and people who want to participate and have ideas, and we have some, money to do something interesting with the whole legacy, I think we'll keep doing that.
Has it crossed your mind that that statue is going to be a destination.
Oh, 100%.
So where people park? I mean, that's a real. Not you don't have to give an answer to
Yeah,
that,
sure.
but I'm thinking like
You're thinking about that.
It's going to be challenging.
So what we've discovered when it was here before, they come all day long and even into the night, but they don't come in hordes. So, and there's that good parking space. There's a number of parking spaces in downtown downtown Ashland.
Littleton,
I
Colorado.
used to live in Littleton. God, I don't know where that came from.
What?
But no, there's some parking. I don't think it'll be as big a problem as people think. There might be a little spillover to side streets, but I don't think, except for the big festival that we're going to have when we unveil him and, celebrate the installation, which will be March 30, 2024, his birthday.
Oh, nice.
That gives us plenty of time to do the construction because there's permits. It's a big process. But I think they'll find parking. I just don't see it being that big a deal. I do think people will come all the time, but
Right.
you'll have, maybe 5 cars parked there
Okay.
at once, and that's still a lot of people.
And Randolph-Macon in the town work really well together,
Yeah,
so they'll figure something out.
They do. They really do. There might be school children coming in a bus, but all that's manageable.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's the biggest thing that ever happened to Ashland. And look, I usually don't make this distinction.
Yeah.
Technically, that the farm that Secretary was born
Yeah.
at and
Yeah.
was raised and trained at
Yeah.
is in Caroline County.
It is in Caroline, and there has been a little pushback.
I'm a little surprised I even made that clarification
Yeah.
on a recording
Yeah.
about this because we think of him as Hanover County,
Yeah.
as Ashland, but
Well, the
he's
Meadow is right over the river.
It's
so
on the line.
right over the North Anna. So, it's very close. But it's true. It's Caroline County, and we actually, there's those in Caroline County who were saying it should be here, and there were, we were sort of looking for a good place. We wanted it to be in a public enough place that people could really visit, and the Meadow, would have been a great spot. But the State Fair of Virginia, the Farm Bureau, they have a different business model, and they're not open every day, and you can't just sort of. We wanted people to be able to roll up in their car and get out and take pictures, and the kids to play around, and we wanted it to be really accessible to fans. And so, of course, had they come up with the 550,000, we might have been going, okay, where do you want it? But I mean, that's a joke. I do think Caroline wants to get their own statue, and I think they will probably succeed in putting something somewhere, maybe Bowling Green, maybe, I don't quite know where. I mean, the thing is, I think you're right. It always has felt like Caroline and Hanover are sort of similar region. Granddad grew up in Ashland, though. He grew up on the house at Racecourse and Duncan. That's the old Victorian house, the painted.
Oh, yeah.
That was his house, right? Catty corner from your family.
I grew up
Yeah.
2 blocks from there. Yeah.
Did you really? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so and then he went to Randolph-Macon. He's always when he owned the Meadow, he was a big supporter of Ashland charities. He founded Camptown Races at the Meadow to benefit Ashland charities. I think it was the Ashland War Memorial they were trying to raise money for. So we shopped at Cross Brothers. I went with my grandmother to Cross Brothers when I was a kid. So there are many ties to Ashland, even if it's on the wrong side of the river. But also Granddad and all my relatives are buried at Woodland Cemetery.
Oh, really?
So yeah, there's a lot of nexus with Ashland, and there. And I hope that Caroline will feel okay about it because we feel like it's a regional. Actually, we feel like it's a statewide thing.
Yeah.
And this is where it happens to be the most logical spot.
Yeah, my grandfather was born on College Avenue in a house.
Yeah.
And again, like
Yeah.
you said, a lot of Chenerys are buried. Over
Tons of
Woodlawn.
Chenerys. There's a bunch of cousins here.
Yep.
Yeah. Some of them aren't named Chenery anymore.
True.
But there are a lot of us around. Yeah.
Yeah, it's Ashland itself is a destination, mostly because of the tracks, I think. But we're also a fairly unique town. The tracks are a big part of that. But the Downtown Ashland Association has done a nice job of really supporting small businesses.
Wonderful.
And creating a vibe for the downtown area. And Secretariat's just going to multiply that times I don't know what, but by a lot.
Oh, I think absolutely. It's going to be, and it's such a beautiful town. It's got such a great feeling. But I think, yeah, they say this is a train town, but, Secretariat had horsepower. So, it's a transportation town, right? There's some ways you can look at it. And one of the Bishop family is very excited about supporting us. Their father was the pharmacist at Barnes Drugs and owned Barnes Drugs. And so Barnes Drugs was right opposite where the statue's going to be. So that's like this lovely little symmetry. I mean, there's so many ways that the history of the community, the people in the community, it's perfect that this is where he's going to be, and that people, I really hope he draws a lot of, I think he will, people to town who will then, celebrate all
check out the rest of it.
Yeah, check out all the shops and restaurants, enjoy it, want to come back.
Barnes Drugstore in 1973.
Yeah.
I probably had not had a milkshake there yet, but I was within a couple of years of having a milkshake in that place. And
yes, we were.
I have such fond memories of the 70s and 80s in
So
Ashland.
Tom Bishop owned it, and it's his kids who are supporting, who are giving a lovely donation to the statue. So that's such a great thing.
So when this notion of the statue coming to Ashland was raised by Jocelyn for the first time, how long ago was that?
That was a year and a half ago.
And she said the number she said, just to own it.
Yeah.
What did you think the chances were that you guys would be where you are right now?
Well, knowing how much people love the horse, and Leanne and I, backing up briefly, my co-author, Leanne was the tourism director at the Meadow for the Farm Bureau. We would host these parties. People would come from Seattle. They would come from Germany.
Really?
They came from everywhere. And people, the foaling shed is still there, the original foaling shed. People would fall down on their knees and cry when they saw the foaling shed. There are people who got engaged in the foaling. I mean, the level of passion of Secretariat fans is so deep. And we had seen that. So we didn't know if we would get institutional support or foundation support or anything, but we really thought it was a good pitch and that Virginia needed this statue. And a lot of people, if they were reminded or taught that Secretariat was born here, if they didn't know it, would go, yeah, Virginia needs a statue. So it was daunting, clearly. It was like, what are we doing? But I think we had great faith that this would happen, that once they saw the statue, that's the other thing. Once it pulled into Ashland, I think a lot of folks who went, statue of a horse, huh? And then they saw it and they went, oh, yes, we want this statue.
Jocelyn is the real deal.
Oh, she's amazing. She is so, and I know you did a podcast with her. She is just, what an artist. And so careful, such a great researcher. She had everything just right.
Extremely detailed and creative.
Very creative.
Which is, I imagine, not typical.
Yeah. Well, she described it, I don't know if she said this, she said, sculpting the horse is like, doing a painting or something, but casting it is like building a house. So you have to have both abilities, and then you have to have the ability to, get commissions. So she's a multi-dimensional artist.
So you're pretty happy right now.
Oh, yeah. I'm thrilled. I'm just thrilled.
So what inspired you to write the book?
So we started writing the book in 2007. For me, it was always the question of how did we get so lucky? How did this amazing horse come to us? And
people travel from all over the world, you're telling me.
They do.
It's the most amazing horse probably known to man.
Well, fans of Man of War would probably question that, but he wasn't around, and so there's no way to compare. No, I agree. I mean, how many athletes of any stripe have their records unbroken after 50 years? I mean,
it doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen. But so I was, I just always felt, and I had traveled with my mother and seen how people still loved her so much, and what she meant, what the horse meant, what she as a person meant to a lot of people because of what she'd overcome to be the leader she became. So I understood all that, but I didn't know how it was it that we produced this horse. Was it just lightning or what? So that was my question. And also I did know enough of the history of the Meadow, and I loved the land, and I just thought there's a story there that needs to be told. And I was a history buff, and I'd done a bunch of research, and I knew about the my ancestors, and they had an interesting story. And I just thought, but it's funny. So we did write this book. It's this big, beautiful coffee table book. We got this great artist to do the cover image, which is so compelling. But in the beginning, I thought, well, this will be a little pamphlet, and maybe they'll sell it in the gift shop, like you might buy it, at the, national park,
right?
Just some little thing. But it kept growing, and we had all these great photographs, and it became this gorgeous thing, and we've sold 45,000 copies of this book.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's become and I've learned so much. We had so much fun doing research. We didn't know that we had a big connection to like the town of Doswell. Mm-hmm. The Doswell family has also supported the statue, but their great grandparents were the inspiration for Granddad to raise horses in Central Virginia. Because most people would think, oh, you can't raise good thoroughbreds here, you have to be in Kentucky. Well, the Doswells had champions who were the champions in the 1880s and 70s. They were one of the dominant stables, and they were Bullfield right near the town of Doswell. So Granddad knew that. They were right across the river from the Meadow. So there's so many great stories that we didn't know, and a lot of people didn't know. So we had so much fun finding those answers.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Who knew that?
Yeah.
Most people. See, this is the other thing we want to tell in connection with the statue. Central Virginia has a very deep and wonderful history with horse racing. They brought the first thoroughbreds to this country, to Caroline County, in the 1760s. The first long thoroughbred races were run in Central Virginia. Some of the greatest sires in the history are from this area. So most people don't know that. It's as though everybody thinks, oh, it just sort of started in Kentucky. Well, of course, Kentucky started in Virginia.
Right.
But thoroughbred horse racing also started in Virginia. And that's a story that, could be told. And there's some very cool sites that we were thinking about having, like an app, and people could go driving around and say, oh, this is where this was, and then learn the stories. And we think they're fun stories.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah. People love to do that kind of thing. And it's like there's wineries you can go visit. Why not visit, horse sites?
I would take that tour.
And also go up to Middleburg and come back down with information along the way.
What's significant about Middleburg?
Well, Middleburg is the center for it's got some of the greatest horse farms up there, but they're also horse hunting, hunting to hounds, and other kinds of riding. So they're a much wealthier, more sort of historic, general equine sports area. Polo, all those kind of things. But if you're doing a horse history tour, there's some great stables up there that, and it's so beautiful too. So, you can make a nice circuit. You can have a reason to come to Central Virginia, stay for several days, and do all this horse stuff. Horse people love horse things. And there are a lot of horse people in the country.
Yeah.
So
what is it about the horse?
Oh, it's so many questions. I think it has to do with the fact that they're so big and powerful. They could mow us down anytime they wanted, but they give us their trust. And we have to earn that trust. We have to be, take good care of them. But when they do, there's this sort of magical connection. I think this has been true historically. They're so powerful, but they allow us to ride them. They allow us to, sort of lead them around. And they have those big, beautiful big, beautiful eyes,
right.
And that's something very soulful. They use horses for therapy for people, for example, veterans of wars who have PTSD. They had what they call equine therapy, and it's not riding the horse, it's learning to communicate non-verbally and get the horse to do what you want. There's this really interesting dynamic that develops when you're alone in a pasture with a horse and you learn to communicate with them. And there's something wonderfully healing about it. So horses are pretty amazing.
Yeah, I rode horses when I was a small kid, and I'm like, this scares me. They're so big.
They're so big.
And I didn't spend enough time with them to have a full appreciation like you do.
Well, so I think there's something called the H gene, which I've just made up, but either you're born with it or you're not. I have a daughter who loves horses, another daughter who's terrified of them. So if you're not born with the H gene, they may not really float your boat.
I did not have the H gene. But I love the story of Secretariat, and I love the fact that you you referenced other athletes not having records that last as long as his have. And what? Go ahead.
I was going to say, I can't remember exactly when they did it, but one time when Sports Illustrated did their top 50 athletes of all time, there was only one animal on the list.
Yeah.
And the animal,
and he was number 35,
and he should have been higher. Yeah. He absolutely should have been higher.
Yeah.
Well, there are those who say he was Virginia's greatest athlete, and I don't want to, diss any other athletes. There have been great athletes out of Virginia, but can any of them say that they are completely unrivaled in everything they did?
There's no athlete that can say that, period, besides
I think
Secretariat.
So, yeah.
Where were you born?
I was born in Colorado, in Denver. My parents were both East Coasters, and they moved out to Colorado in 1949 just to kind of have a fresh start,
It's a beautiful place to have a fresh start.
Beautiful. My dad had trained there in Colorado during the war in the 10th Mountain Division.
Oh, okay.
And he fell in love with it, so...
10th Mountain was out in Colorado back then.
Yeah.
Because today they're in upstate New York.
Right. Well, they trained in the high mountains for the war.
And no better place than Denver probably to train, or that area.
Yeah.
So you grew up in...
Grew up in Colorado.
Okay.
But came back here a lot as a child to visit my grandfather's farm, which was the Meadow. And loved it. Just totally fell in love with Virginia. It was so beautiful. So different from the very dry kind of, Colorado is beautiful in the mountains, but it's high plains, and it's almost a desert. It's very dry.
Dry, and the altitude can have an impact on you as well, especially if you're a visitor to the area.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But it's gorgeous.
It is gorgeous. And the city of Denver is beautiful because of a lot of planted trees. But if there wasn't irrigation, it would be a pretty brown place.
Yeah. Which is weird to think of.
I know.
Yeah, it's really weird to think of.
Yeah.
It's maybe the highest desert in the world.
Well, no, there's much higher ones in Chile.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're pushing on the bounds of my knowledge.
Well, I studied Latin American studies. That was my major. So
okay.
I have lots of bits of arcane knowledge.
Yours is probably more meaningful and useful than my knowledge, for sure. Did you ever live in Virginia as a child?
I never did. Mm-mm.
Okay.
No.
So help me understand Secretariat being raised at the Meadow.
At the Meadow. Well, Granddad was from here.
Okay.
And he left Virginia in 1920. There were very few opportunities for making money, and he kind of he loved horses, and he knew the only way he'd be able to have them is if he made a lot of money. He went to New York City, had a real skill in finance, got some investors to back him, bought up utility companies, became very wealthy. By about 1930, in 1936, he came back to Virginia and bought back the Meadow, which had been in his family up until it was lost to the bank in like 1912. So that's why here, and he knew the family history. He knew about Bullfield. He knew, as a kid, what he had done. They grew up very poor. And so the kids were doing anything they could to earn money. And one of the things he did is he walked from Ashland up to Doswell to exercise the few remaining horses that belonged to the Doswell stable. And that's how he fell in love with horse racing. And Bernard Doswell was, a cousin, distant cousin, and he rode the horses for him. So anyway, Granddad had this love of the region. He had this love of horses. And when the Meadow itself, the property, became available, he bought it and started his racing stable in 1936 at the site where it is now the State Fair of Virginia.
So Secretariat was born in 1970.
70.
Where were your parents in 1970?
We were in Colorado.
In Colorado.
Yeah.
But your mom was deeply involved in Secretariat for those 3 years.
Well, so what happened was grandmother died in 1968. And Granddad had been going downhill. He was getting senile. So they sort of knew something had to happen, and then all of a sudden grandmother's gone, and Mom has to step up to run the farm. And she really wanted to do it. She was very excited about it. Because she was not that happy as a housewife. She was a very energetic, ambitious, talented woman, and she was kind of bored, frankly. Yeah. And didn't like cooking or cleaning, and
who does?
Well, some people feel like, I like to cook, but anyway, she was made for this job. And when it came open, I think her siblings thought, well, we'll just get it, sort of get it in the black, because it had been sort of neglected, and then we'll sell it. But Mom had other ideas. She said, no, I want to run this stable and I want to make something of it. And the thing is, Granddad had great broodmares. He had great bloodlines that he had developed over 30 years and had some great horses. And she thought, hey, we can keep this going. So what she ended up doing is commuting from Denver to Virginia. She was
commuting that whole time?
Yeah, not like she would be here a week, go home, spend a week, come back for a week. So she was gone a lot. And she was also going to New York because that's where Belmont was sort of our home track. So that's where the horses would go to race. Sometimes in the winter they'd go to Florida, but in the rest of the year they'd be at Belmont. So she was floating all over the place and just as happy as she could be. But it was hard. She had 4 kids still at home.
Yeah, because you were a teenager.
I was a teenager,
yeah.
So my older sister was a senior in high school, and she was very responsible, and she had her driver's license. So she got a lot delegated to her. Sarah, take care of this. Sarah, will you drive Chris to, And I was sort of a rebel. The movie, if you've seen the movie, shows me as kind of a hippie rebel. That was certainly true. and they shipped me off to a boarding school.
Ah.
And at that time, I thought, what? This is no fair. She gets to stay home. Why don't I? But when I was a parent, I began to see that it wouldn't have been very smart to leave me unsupervised because unlike Sarah, I had my own ideas about what I wanted to do. So they sent me to a boarding school in Massachusetts, and it was a great school, and I was happy to be there. But they needed me supervised because Mom was gone a lot. And the 2 younger brothers they were younger, and they were, and Dad was traveling too.
Yeah.
He traveled for his work. So he was an oil and gas lawyer. So, it was a time of big transition in our family. And then
a lot of sacrifice from everybody.
A lot of sacrifice, yeah. And we just knew how much happier Mom was, so we were all happy for her, but it wasn't, I can't say it wasn't stressful. But then Dad, because he knew that her world was now centered towards the East, he got a job in New York, and he moved the family to New York in 1972.
Okay.
Now, if you see the movie, that's all left out. New York is left out completely. And, Disney said, too many places, too confusing, we have to streamline. And they made a great movie. So, so that's, I was first in boarding school and then off in college. But whenever I was around and we could come back to the farm, I would come. And so I got to see Secretariat as a foal, and I got to see him as a yearling and a 2-year-old, even though I didn't live here.
So, help me with terms. Foal is what
foal,
age?
I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
Some people say colt. A colt is a male foal. Foal is a baby.
Gotcha.
Basically.
And 0 to 6 months?
Yeah, but it's foal, then yearling, then 2-year-old. So foal is first year, yearling is after they've turned 1.
1 to 2.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
These are loose terms, but yeah.
But generally speaking.
Yeah,
that
generally speaking.
follows that.
Yeah.
All right, so you said you went to boarding school in Massachusetts. That had to be a massive culture shock for you.
It was.
Can you talk about what was new and bizarre to you?
Well, first of all, there were only about 5 of us from west of the Mississippi, and they had these weird notions about Colorado. It's like, it was kind of this backwards country. It hadn't yet become known for great skiing, and it was on its way towards doing that. But I felt like these were very sophisticated. They dressed well. They knew, they all were miles ahead of me in sophistication. But, it's sort of everything was an equalizer, and we all, I got used to it. And we were right outside Boston. I loved I was able to take the train into Boston, and I could go to museums and movies and shopping and all kinds of great things. Yeah.
It's funny in sports, and we're talking a lot about sports because of the Secretariat. Boston-New York rivalry is a massive
legendary,
thing. It's probably the rivalry. Pick a sport.
Yeah.
But Boston is tiny compared to the 5 boroughs. It's not a big place, but it is such a charming, unique place to go.
Well, it is a big metro statistical area.
Oh, it's
very
dense. Big
MSA. Yeah, but you're right, the city of Boston. And it's so historic. I loved history. I was in Concord, Mass. Thoreau, Louisa May Alcott. I mean, it was like I was in heaven. It was wonderful.
Yeah, and Revolutionary War.
War, yeah.
It was either fought there or in Virginia.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, that's the other thing I love about Virginia. I mean, I love the history. It's just so I don't know. It just makes you feel, I don't know, alive.
Alive, and you have
connected.
Roots to that.
Yeah.
Or you're connected to those roots.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. So, where'd you go to school? College? After?
Well, I went to 3 colleges. I started out at Antioch, and then I ended up finally at University of Texas because I was interested in Latin American studies. I did go as an exchange student to Chile.
Okay.
And then I spent some time in Ecuador, and I loved Spanish, and I don't know, I got oriented in that direction. So
was it about the language mostly?
Started out about the language, and then once I went down there, the people were so warm, and it was just such a kind of an embracing environment. It was really lovely. And I ended up, most of my career, I started out as a lawyer. I went to Berkeley for law school, and as a lawyer, I did immigration and refugee and asylum law, working mostly with people from Central America. And then when I had kids, it was so hard to be, the stress of being a lawyer was too much. So I ended up quitting law and becoming an ESL teacher. So I've worked with immigrants almost all my life.
Yeah, we met a local small business owner.
Teresa Lopez.
Yes,
I saw that. She is fabulous.
Oh
I love her.
Gosh! I mean, within a couple of minutes, I'm like, you're a force of nature.
She is amazing. We are so lucky to have her in our community, and her husband Edgar is great too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am now a patron of her store.
Yes, it's a great store.
We stopped talking to her, and both of us went straight over there, got food, and saw the store.
And talk with her more.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
No, they are amazing. They are amazing. It's a great family.
Great family, and I mean, people that are several generations in this country don't have a real appreciation for what it's like to immigrate.
Absolutely.
Anywhere.
Absolutely. And what great work ethics they have. I mean, they work around the clock. It's amazing.
Yeah. Most other cultures would be considered lazy in comparison.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we said that afterwards. Exactly how do you fit everything you do in 24 hours?
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
And she had a smile on her face, and she seemed like she had endless energy, too.
I know.
Yeah.
She's phenomenal.
All right, so Antioch, where is that?
It's in Ohio, Yellow Springs, Ohio, near Dayton.
Why did you choose Antioch out of high school?
Well, I was a rebel, and I was countercultural, and it was the most liberal place I could go. I think I was just trying to drive my parents crazy, frankly.
No, I understand.
Well, this was 1971,
So Antioch and then Texas.
Yeah.
Which, by today's standards, is a fairly conservative state.
But it's an excellent school. Always was.
But Austin is not necessarily
conservative. No, Austin
is not. Keep Austin weird, I think is
the slogan. Exactly. Yeah. No, Austin was very fun to be in the mid-'70s. Great music.
I think it's fun now.
And some great food. Yeah.
I think it's really been like that for decades.
No, it has. It's really,
It's maintained that mostly.
Yeah.
And then the fact you went out to Berkeley.
And Berkeley, I know.
Doesn't get much more liberal than that.
No, it doesn't. But, that's, I sort of got politicized by studying about Latin America. I mean, there's so much poverty and anyway, I was always sort of a questioner. I was always looking for sort of different understanding, and answers. So, but, yeah.
And the world's richer for multiple perspectives. A single perspective or only two perspectives.
Agree. I think so. I think we all have things to learn from each other.
We just need to listen.
Yeah. And that's one thing that's fabulous about Secretariat. He was always such a unifier. He really, at the time, in 1973, it was such a crazy time, between, plane hijackings and Vietnam and Watergate and, just sort of this real sense of division, parents and children, and he was something everybody could embrace and feel good about, and he made them feel good about themselves. And so we have always worked really hard to maintain him as as sort of a pure symbol of the family has, and he can't be used for co-opted for any particular cause whatsoever. So it's great to have him remain that way and be I hope a source of that in this modern era, which is also very divisive.
Yeah.
And I really think, you find people, you strike up a conversation and you have this wonderful thing in common, and the rest of it doesn't really matter, So I'm excited about him playing that role again in this community.
I love that. And you say community, I think it's probably statewide.
Yeah, I think it is statewide. certainly. Yeah.
Speaking of statewide,
Yeah.
Does the state government have anything to do with your efforts?
No, I mean, we're certainly getting support from the Virginia Equine Association. They're supporting us. I don't think they actually can give us money. I don't know what the regulations are, but they're supporting us in other ways, making contact, urging others to, support us and giving us opportunities to, do presentations. And so Virginia Tourism is supporting us because they can give us a grant that helps us with, like a big love sign or, other things that promote tourism,
right? Which
we certainly will be doing. And so they're behind us, which is great.
All right. So I can't wait to ask you the next set of questions. Yeah. So you knew Secretariat as a foal. Mm-hmm. And there had been successful horses from that stable, but not like anywhere near the level the Secretariat ultimately attained. When did your mom or anybody else around Secretariat know that Secretariat was different?
Well, he came out different from, when he was born. He was bright red. He stood up way sooner than most foals do. Big, sturdy. I think someone said, "Oh, he's a whopper," when he came out. And he had this, and then from then on, he sort of always showed sort of a different spirit. He was curious. He was, his mother was sort of the queen of the herd. She was the dominant mare. And so therefore he was kind of like the heir apparent. So he was in his foal crop. He was also sort of the biggest and most, he was the biggest personality in the group. Like and, people think horses don't have personalities. Well, you don't know horses if you think that, it's like dogs. They have personalities,
Absolutely.
So, so he was always fun to watch, and he was always a little bit like, wow. But, it takes more than, sort of pizzazz and size to be a great racehorse. I mean, you could be a great racehorse and be sort of nondescript and small, but if you've got the spirit, and you've got the drive and you can get the muscles coordinated, you could be a great racehorse. So you never know. I mean, we thought he was fabulous, but, and the movie does allude to this. He sort of was like a gangly teenager who grows into his height too fast. So he didn't have muscle control exactly as well as it developed later when he first started racing. So we didn't really know. I mean, the trainer really expected a lot from him, but it took him a little while to put it all together. He lost his first race, for example.
Yeah.
But then from then on, each race, he showed us something new. So every time we saw him race, it was like, oh, wow, he's better than we thought. Oh, wow, he's even better than we thought. So it was, you can't say, oh, at this moment we knew. It was more like, it was kind of like just watching this train pick up speed. It's like, wow, what else is he going to do?
He gave you some signs along the way, but it sounds like he was a lot more gradual.
Oh, well, he had all the potential. He had the best sire in the nation, who was Bold Ruler. His mother was a great mare, had produced many great horses, and her father was known for stamina. So we knew it was a good cross, speed and stamina mix. That's what you're always going for. He knew he was beautiful. We knew he was smart. We knew he had the physical ability. Was he going to put it all together? And he did. But none of that is guaranteed.
How old was he when he ran his first race?
It was July 4 of 1972, so he was 2.5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but still gangly at that point.
Oh yeah. Well, he grew an inch in during that first year. They had to get a whole new belt girth for him, not belt, but the girth is what holds on the saddle.
Right.
And so they had to let it out a notch and then get a whole new one for him because he was still growing.
Yeah, one of the things that I found fascinating, and tell me if this is right, he would run one of the Triple Crown races, and it's exhausting for those horses. I mean, I think that's why the Triple Crown's so hard. If you win the first two, good luck winning the third one because that horse is exhausted.
And the third one is much longer than the other two.
Right, which makes it especially harder.
Yeah.
He would run past the finish line like he wasn't really working that hard.
And the jockey said, the Belmont, for example, which, he broke the record by over 2 seconds, he said he wasn't all that, he wasn't that tired. He could have gone on a lot longer. And he was just sort of loping along.
But beautifully
fast. And so fast. And I think he set an unofficial record in the furlong after. Furlong is an eighth of a mile. So he just, was like...
That's ridiculous.
And the other horses were so far behind. It wasn't about beating them. It was about, hey, I feel good. I'm going to see what I can. I'm going to go as fast as I can.
Yeah.
As long as I can.
And Belmont was the one that he won by
31 lengths. 31 lengths, almost a quarter of a mile. But in the Derby, he ran every furlong faster. That is also unheard of.
Yeah.
Because, usually it's a speed race. You start out fast and then everybody gets tired. Not Secretariat. He just was accelerating.
Like you said, he got better and better.
Yeah, he did.
Showed him something new every race.
Yeah. And both the jockey and the trainer and Mom were all so sad when he retired at the end of his third-year-old year because he could have shown us such amazing stuff as a 4-year-old. Because really he was growing and learning and getting better and better all the time.
Why did he retire?
Because Granddad died and we had huge estate taxes. He died in January of 1973. By September, we had to come up with $11 million in estate taxes.
Wow.
And so the only way we could do that was to syndicate Secretariat to a breeding syndicate. And Mom was savvy. She negotiated the right to race him through his 3-year-old year and control everything that happened. They couldn't say anything to her. But at the end of that, November 11, 1973, she had to hand him over. And that was it. And so he never raced again because the money is in breeding, frankly.
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
I'm going to make a reference to that in a couple minutes.
Okay.
So do you remember the Kentucky Derby in 73?
I wasn't there, but I certainly saw it.
It was on TV. It's been on TV forever.
Of course.
So where were you when the race took place?
I wasn't at college. Here's the thing that's so weird. People say, where were you? What do you remember? It was such a blur. That whole time was so surreal. I mean, really, we didn't, there was so much media attention. There was so much going on. I was living 2 lives. One was kind of the normal kind of college kid who was, doing my thing. And then the other was, watching my mother being interviewed on the Today Show, So...
It's kind of kooky, right?
I'm pretty sure I was with friends at a friend's house. Who I was with? I can't remember.
It was 50 years ago.
I remember the Belmont because I was at the track, and I remember that very specifically. But Mom...
You had to be at Belmont, right?
Oh, yeah, I had to. And the thing is, Mom had, she had a brother and a sister, and they were all co-owners. And each of them had friends and business associates, so there was such a large group of people that there really wasn't room for the kids. I hate to say that. So we didn't get to go to the Derby or the Preakness, but we all went to the Belmont.
Right, so you have memories of that day.
Yeah, absolutely.
So walk me through that experience.
Well, I got up that morning thinking, oh my gosh, we might win the Triple Crown. And nobody had done it in 25 years, and nobody even really thought about it. It was like, oh, well, it doesn't happen anymore,
right.
But here we were on the brink, and we thought it was very possible, unless he woke up not feeling well, which happens. Or stumbled, or who knows what. But so I was going, wow, that would be the most amazing thing. And again, this feeling of us. Why us? How is this possible? And then just, I was living with my sister in Brooklyn, and she had this, converted loft that was pretty funky. And, so we didn't normally dress up, but we had to find, we got out nice linen dresses and found pantyhose, which I, never wore, and nice shoes. And we take the bettors train from Brooklyn to the Belmont. And the bettors train is where all the bettors are, and they all have their daily racing form, and they're, and they're all, just the bettors, the regular horse fans. And so here we are, I remember seeing, because the newspapers had Mom's face on it, and the horses, and the headlines, Penny Tweedy, and my sister and I are kind of sitting there with our, kind of hiding behind our hands going, this is so surreal. And then we get to Belmont, and all the bettors get out and walk in the normal entrance, and we climb up the little stairs to the elite, owner's box area, or the, anyway, it just was, it was really fun, but it was really strange. The whole thing was...
The whole day had to feel surreal.
Yeah, it was like we were on a movie set or something, and it was like couldn't quite believe any of it was real. But it was, and then the race itself was just unbelievable.
So how fast did he run that race, roughly? Do you remember?
I think somebody's clocked it. They've done the math, and I know it was in the 40s, around 40 miles per hour. But
it's like a little over 2 minutes maybe for the whole race.
Oh, it was 2 minutes 24 seconds.
So
and most horses, I mean, the closest horse, he was 2.2 2.5 seconds faster than the next record. And every year when the Belmont happens, I it's great. You watch the race, and it's like I see the time and I go, not anywhere near.
I think this year was like 2:29 something.
Yeah, it was way slower. It was way slower. Yeah.
All right, so but the 2 minutes and 24 seconds. Mm-hmm. Do you have memories of the actual race?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because I think I would have been too anxious, uptight, nervous to actually register memories.
No. Well, I'll tell you what. The program I had was, in shreds by the time the race came along, because I was like so nervous. But, watching it, we're all freaking out because he goes to the lead right away, and he never does that. And it's such a long race that's bad strategy. But it was his idea. He was feeling good, and the jockey knew better than to get in his way, essentially. He trusted him. And, so we're watching him go to the lead right away, and then Sham comes up, his great competitor, Sham, comes up and catches him, and then the backstretch is, it's hard to see, but we had binoculars, so you're watching, and, they're dueling Secretariat and Sham and Secretariat and Sham. So there's this moment where you think, oh my God, what if today's the day? Because Sham had been valiant and right on Secretariat's heels for, all the Triple Crown races. And then slowly we see Sham start to drop back, and slowly Secretariat pulls away, and then he keeps pulling away more and more and more. And it just becomes inexorable. It's like, and others knew. I was too busy to actually notice the time, but other people were noticing the time and saying, oh my God, he's going too fast. This is not smart. I mean, what's going to happen? He won't be able to sustain it. But so we're just kind of standing in awe, and the crowd is babbling and screaming, and can you believe this, as he gets a little farther and farther and farther ahead, and he comes charging around the corner and the final turn, and then you're thinking again, the surrealness. It's like, this can't be happening. Something will happen to bring it back to normal reality, and the only thing you can think of is that the jockey will fall off. So you think, Ronnie, just don't fall off. Just don't, and we're doing that, and Mom's doing that, and, it's like, that's all you can think about because it's so unbelievable. And then, he keeps pulling ahead, and then, and then he crosses the line, and then it's a long time before the rest of them cross the line behind him, and people really didn't know what to say. All they could say is, can you believe that? Did you see that? And then I don't know. It was, and then we're all, just trying to celebrate, trying to figure out how to celebrate, and people, it's just, we know we've all seen something really historic and really amazing. But it's hard to process. It takes a while to process. And there was a little piece of me that thought, wow, this is so great. But, sort of assuming like everything progresses in some other horse will come along and be as good. And it just hasn't happened ever, And so as time's gone on, you realize more and more just how unbelievable that was.
Yeah, each year that passes.
Yeah.
Because how many Triple Crown winners have there been since '73?
Well, there have been 5.
Yeah.
And none of them have come any. But here's the other stat I find interesting. If you add up, there have been 13 Triple Crown winners. If you take their times in each of the 3 races, put them all together, they're still, the fastest of them is still 5 seconds behind Secretariat. So we're talking creme de la creme here.
Yeah.
And they're not anywhere near him either.
Yeah.
So
it's wild.
It's wild.
2 minutes, 24 seconds.
Yeah.
Is your recollection that it felt like it took forever because you're
of
like,
course.
Oh. So it felt like half an hour. Oh,
yeah. Oh, no. It just, and so much is happening around you. There's pandemonium, and so, it's time. It's kind of out of body. It's not normal time. It's not a normal experience. Nothing about it was normal.
That's probably the most not normal you've ever experienced.
Yeah. No.
Did you place a bet that day?
I don't bet.
On Secretariat or in general?
In general. I mean, I have lost, every time I bet, I lose money, so I just don't bet.
So you're just being smart.
Yeah, I mean, it's like fun, but no, I don't bet.
Did any of your siblings bet?
My little brother was a good bettor, and he probably did. I don't recall those conversations. Most people who bet on Secretariat never cash their check. They kept them.
Yeah.
Because why? It's more.
It's worth more.
It's more. Yeah, emotionally, it's worth more. And if it was
probably
a $2 bet, you probably got 10 cents back. You got $2, 10 cents.
I can't imagine. We can probably look up the odds. But the odds had to be crazy.
It was. Yeah, you not worth cashing that check.
Yeah, well, sentimental value, the emotional value. I was there that day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
because
really cool.
I was there. This is my proof.
All right, so what was the? I don't know, 6 months after, a year after, a couple years, I don't know.
Yeah.
It was sad that he had to retire. So that was
he retired, absolutely.
But before he retired, before you realized that he was going to retire, was that a weird period, a fun period?
Well, here's the thing. We knew she had to sell him before he ran the Triple Crown races. She syndicated him in February.
Oh, so you already knew that?
Yeah, we already knew that.
Yeah.
But it was a huge risk. This was a very savvy move on her part because he might not have won.
Right.
But if we had waited and he won, we would have gotten a lot more money. If we had waited and he lost, we would have gotten a lot less money, and we couldn't have paid the taxes. So she really sort of had to take that gamble.
Yeah. Well, she played it down the middle, which she hedged. And hedging's usually pretty smart.
Yeah.
Yeah. But do you have what was it like? Did you go around the country with the horse? Did your mom go around the?
No, I mean, I was in college, and I actually went back to Ecuador because I had I was doing a bilingual ed program as through Antioch had a program with another college in Ecuador, and I went off to Ecuador and came back in December. But I did, I kept in touch, of course. But really, I didn't have, I went on with my life, more or less. I mean, I was in college. I was 20, I had, and really there wasn't much for me to do. Mom kept racing him. And it's weird to say you just go on with your life, but, that was my job. I was a college student.
Yeah, I think in these days, kids might drop out of college and go do something, live the life that's born out of something amazing like that.
Yeah. Well, we had to pay the taxes. We weren't rolling in dough. I mean, obviously you have to have a certain amount of money to even have horses.
Right.
But it wasn't as though, I had access to that. Mom had to use everything she had to support the stable and keep the horses going, and they kept winning, so that was great. But, the old saying about horse racing, how do you make $1 million in horse racing? You start with $1 billion. So this is not a money-making endeavor.
Not a great return.
Although you can make a huge amount of money, but it's very rare. It's like, winning the lotto.
Or becoming a pro football player.
Exactly. Or writing a best-selling novel. It doesn't happen very often.
No, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's rare air.
So she had, and she kept the horses going for a long time, but, she never had another Secretariat. And with Granddad gone and his business not supporting the horse racing stable, there was a lot of attrition over time. She finally got down to one horse, and then no horses when she was older. And
did she stay here? Was she here the whole time?
No, she was in New York. We had moved to New York, and that was the center really of that was where the racing was. She came down here a lot. But Granddad had been so generous in his will. He gave money to Randolph-Macon. He gave money to St. James the Less Church. He gave money to his church in New York and other colleges, Washington and Lee, to Lincoln Center in New York. There wasn't enough money for Mom in the will to keep both the farm and the horses. And so she wasn't going to give up the horses. He had spent all that time building up this amazing bloodline, and that was her heart, was racing. And it was heartbreaking to have to sell the Meadow, but they had to sell the Meadow in 1979.
Oh wow, that's pretty quick.
Yeah. Well, that was when the estate had to be settled.
Yeah.
Her brother and sister were not interested in supporting her, going in with her. Had they combined forces, they could have kept them. But they were going, nah, we're done.
So your mom ended up just going back to Colorado full time?
No, she took the horses to New York.
To New York.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, so the horses went with her.
Yeah, yeah, because she took the horses to New York, and that was by then the center of the family was New York.
Got it. And that's where she spent the rest of her days.
No, she didn't. She lived there until 92, and then she moved to Lexington, which, that was her world, and that's such a beautiful, great place to be, and so she loved Kentucky. She was there until she got ill enough. In 2005, we made her move to Colorado, where the rest of us by then had moved. We'd all reassembled in Colorado, and because she, we couldn't keep flying out to Kentucky to take care of her every time. She was getting old. Yeah. So we said, Mom, you got to live near us. So she did, and so she lived the last 12 years of her life in Colorado.
With all 4 of her kids?
Us. Yep, all 4 of us.
That's unusual.
It was great. Yeah, it was really wonderful to have her there.
Well, and to have all 4 of you there.
Yeah, and have all 4 of us. And then the other thing was I started then traveling with her when she got sick, like in the early 2000s. And so I would, go with her to races, and I would meet the fans, and I would watch her. She was unbelievable. People would line up for 8 hours to have her sign things, and she would sign things for 8 hours. Her hand, she would have to soak her hand in ice because it got so sore, but she would keep going.
She's a rock star.
Oh, she was amazing. She was really amazing. Yeah. No, and so I learned from that. She was always very humble with the fans, and I learned from that, to be the same way. She was a real model. I haven't signed, nobody's wanted me to sign anything for 8 hours. But I have signed a lot of books, and I was going to say, and that's fun.
I should have bought your book before you came.
Absolutely. I should have brought you one.
We have one.
Okay.
We'll get you one.
Yeah.
Paul.
But anyway, so that's sort of how I learned about the business, and it was during that time that I said, I need to write this book. Because the Secretariat story had been told from the point of view of sports. Bill Knack wrote this fabulous book, Secretariat, really a great book. It's out of print, but if you can get a copy, it's really good. But so I wanted to write the family side, the granddad side, mom's side. Granddad was a great man. He did a lot of really amazing things. And so that was my intent, and I think I understood that was a need when I was traveling around with her. And then, and by then, my kids were grown. I was at a point in my career where I could spend more time with her. And then, I did a lot to, take care of her in her older years.
How old are your kids now?
39 and 37.
Are they on the East Coast?
Well, one's in Philly and the other's in Albany. Yeah. I can get on Amtrak and go see them both.
Yeah.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And you can see Secretariat.
Yeah, right. And I can walk to the Amtrak station with my little rollerboard, get on the train, get out, see my kids. It's pretty fabulous.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah.
All right, so you wrote a book with your co-author. Knack was written. Others have written about Secretariat. How was the movie tied into any of those books and or your family?
So the movie was based on Bill Knack's book with interviews of Mom. So the screenwriter came out and spent time interviewing Mom. He came to the Meadow. Leanne and I showed him around the Meadow. We had a great time talking to him and filling him in more. The book was not written our book was not written until 2010, came out just before the movie. So there's no real correlation there except for the fact that he got a lot of info from us and from Mom. And so they did a really good job. They left out certain things. They left out my aunt. They left out New York. They left out Reva Ridge, who was our other great champion, who won the Derby and the Belmont the year before Secretariat.
That was your family source as well? That was our
family source as well. That was Mom's first great success.
Wow.
And the reason they left him out is they said, well, you can't have 2 champions in one movie. And yeah, you're right. Well, they made a good movie. They knew what they were doing.
Yeah, I imagine they have a formula.
Oh, yeah. The tension was great. In a movie where you know exactly what's going to happen, you're still on the edge of your seat. That's good movie making.
Yeah. It's impossible movie making. That's also rare kind of stuff.
No, it's true. But anyway, they they left out Reva, left out New York, my aunt. But you know what? They did, most of it is true. Certain things they had to sort of condense facts. Like, for example, they show me singing in a musical and Mom calls in because she can't be there and she's sorry she can't be there, and they hold the phone up It's really kind of funny. I don't sing. I was never in that musical. There's no way. But they use that as sort of a way to represent the kinds of things as a mother she missed in her kids' lives. So that was sort of they used me as sort of, and also they used me to exemplify the division in the country and the contrast between, anti-war and pro-war and, so that was fun. I was the emblem of all that in the movie.
And you felt they were fairly accurate in that portrayal?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 100%.
So for movie makers, it sounds like they were fairly accurate relative to most movies that are based on, or should be based on real events.
Yeah, you can't believe everything, and people do. They think, oh, did your mother say that? And I go, I don't think so. But most of it was really true. And Diane Lane did a fabulous job. I thought she was great.
Yeah, she's a really good actress.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned earlier how y'all were, while the race was going on, y'all were saying, don't fall off,
yes,
fall off. And
exactly.
I remember John Malkovich
says it in the movie.
Ronnie, just don't fall off.
Exactly. Well, exactly. Well, they took a lot of it. There was a lot of good material to work with, so they didn't have to make that stuff up.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, are you full time in Asheville now? Mm-hmm. Okay. What brought you back to this area?
Well, when I was here to write the book, I just had so much fun. I spent the summer of 2007 subletting a kid's apartment in the Fan, and boy, was that fun! Richmond is such a great town, and then I have cousins here. I have friends. I have writing that book was such a fun experience, and I just when I was ready to retire. And Mom had by then gone, and it was kind of like time to move on. And Denver had gotten very expensive and kind of hot and crowded, and I wanted a smaller, quieter place. And I had always loved Ashland. I'd always thought, God, that would be fun to live there. So when it was time for me to make a shift, I went, Ashland.
And you had never really lived here.
No, I'd been through a lot.
Yeah.
As a kid, I came and shopped with my grandmother at Cross Brothers. I remember, Ashland was, and I'd been to various festivals when I'd come back many times because we had these annual Secretariat birthday parties at the State Fair at the Meadow.
Right.
With Leanne. She'd organize them and I'd come. And so I'd been back a lot. And it was such a great community. How can you?
Camptown races lived a couple of different lives.
Yes.
One, I think, back in the 70s?
No, first it was in the mid-50s.
It started that early.
Yeah,
wow.
At the Meadow. But it was there only 5 years. And then one year, Granddad found glass in one of the paddocks, and he said, "Oh, we're not doing this anymore."
Yeah.
Because that could cut a horse. And,
sure.
It got a little wild, I guess. So, so then it moved on to other places. But yeah, it started at the Meadow in the 50s.
And I think they redid it at the Meadow, or really close to the Meadow again. It must not have been at the Meadow because I think it was actually on this side of the river. But back in the 90s?
Yeah, it might have been. I think it was at Strawberry Hill for a while.
Yeah.
And I don't know where. I don't know where else it was. I sort of lost track of that. But
when we were growing up, we went. It was essentially in Ashland. It was maybe just outside the limits. But you go up one north.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
They did that twice, I think. There were two different periods where they had Camptown races.
Yeah, exactly. Because it went away for a while. Then they brought it back there.
Then brought it back, yeah.
But
I gather it was a wild time.
The first iteration when we were kids was absolutely wild.
Yeah.
A little tamer the second time around.
Yeah, I bet.
It was, that's like a little Woodstock in horse racing the first time around, I think. So,
Would have been fun.
Wild children.
Yeah.
So how do you spend your time these days?
Well, I'm writing a memoir, or actually I'm writing a biography of Mom, which is also, it's kind of a mother-daughter memoir. And so I've been doing that for a while. But the other thing, I have this great project that I'm really passionate about. One of the things I discovered in writing the book was that the folks who raised Secretariat, mostly African-American grooms who live in the Dawn area. And I knew some of them growing up, and there's some really talented horse people in that group. And it's mostly two families, the Tillmans and the Mines, and they're pretty well integrated. I mean, there are many intermarriages there. But so I discovered through my research that they are, in fact, the descendants of the people who were enslaved at the Meadow.
Wow. When
my great-great-great-great-great-aunt was the mistress of the Meadow. So that, when I grew up, I sort of thought, I knew my granddad was from Virginia, but I didn't understand all of what that meant. I didn't understand that my ancestors were actually enslaving other people. It took a long time to learn that, but when I researched the book, I saw the slave schedules. I saw people's names in wills, and so that became like this is really intense, and especially because I knew their descendants. It wasn't abstract at all.
Right.
So one of the things we found out, I don't know, do you remember Tom Street? Anyway, he was an Ashlander.
Yep.
His family worked at the Meadow. His father and his uncle and his grandfather. And they knew where a slave cabin was on former Meadow property. Yeah. So one time I was hanging out with Tom. He said, "Oh, do you know about the slave cabin?" He showed it to me. Nobody knew there was a slave cabin in that area. So it's and so we started, just thinking, well, we've got to do something to preserve this. This is an important part of history. And then I ended up meeting at a Morris family reunion some white cousins of mine who were also descendants of the family who owned the Meadow. And they were also interested in the same topic. So we started meeting. And then I got contacted on Ancestry by a mines guy who had former FBI, lives in Northern Virginia, who was from the African American mine side. And he wanted to know more about his family. He came down, we met, I showed him around, showed him the slave. All of this has become a process of, there's a group of us, black and white, who meet regularly, and at the end of June, we put on a black and white reunion, a gathering of the descendants of the Meadow, both the enslavers and the enslaved. And so we had this fabulous barbecue. 180 people came. We hired a genealogist to do the genealogy of the families of those who had been enslaved, because it's so hard for African Americans to find their history.
Yeah, a lot of it wasn't recorded.
Wasn't recorded. They didn't have last names. It's like there's so many roadblocks. So anyway, she found that all this stuff took it back to the 1700s for most of these families. And so at the reunion, we had these big, long family trees for them. And said, here's your grandmother, fill in what we don't know. And it was just so meaningful. And we got to show them the cabin. And I also know, Mom told me, and I have photographs, where the slave graveyard was. And that has been lost to time. And the land has been resculpted through the widening of the road and also the state fair. So it's we know roughly where it is. But we also want to do something there, maybe have a plaque just to say these people, we think these people were buried here, because there are no stones. You're not going to, fix up the cemetery or anything, but we want something memorializing. So, but anyway, this group of us have continued meeting and working together and trying to figure out what next steps are. And it's just been so amazing to me to have the opportunity to talk about things like race and our history and conflicts with people who are, could by all rights be very kind of antagonistic to us, but they're not. They're totally welcoming. And it's like, yeah, we are now in this point where we need to heal the country, and let's talk to each other.
Talk and listen to each other.
Talk and listen. And that's what we're doing, and learn from each other and talk about what really happened and what do we do about that? How do we work together? So that's been just emotionally just fabulous.
There's not a lot of other examples of that going on that I'm aware of. I think if you're an ancestor of slave owners, you're probably quite embarrassed with that linkage, and you're like, I don't want to engage. Don't
even want to know, don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing about it is, you didn't do it. Your ancestors did it. So you don't have to take on a lot of guilt, but you do have a responsibility, I think, to share in that story and just discovery of that story. And, and there were some tears at that reunion. There were some, one of our members, one of the Morrises, is a poet, and she was so eloquent, and she had people in tears talking, she was talking about how the process of her understanding what her family had participated in and how she felt now, and how, but it's not about just sort of like, I don't know. It's a much more equal, uplifting, kind of joyful thing than it might sound, and it's because
you're all there trying to heal.
We're all trying to heal. That's all it is. It's not about blame. It's not about accusation. It's not about guilt. It's about this happened. We were on both sides of it. What do we do now?
Yeah.
We're all in the same space. That's the amazing thing to people. They're still right there, and they are the ones who raised Secretariat.
Yeah.
So part of my interest also is in making sure the role of the African Americans who raised this fabulous animal gets recognized.
Yeah.
Because they're part of the story, a big part of the story.
Yeah, huge part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. You don't have a dog who's not well raised turns out anxious and, difficult, right? A dog who's well raised is a joy and does all kind of great things. And it's the same with horses, So if if he wasn't treated really well and trained really well and, given everything he needed, he wouldn't have been the great horse he was.
Yeah. No, it's a massive team. It sounds like that was
exactly.
part of that.
So I just, it's a joyful part of the story to me. It's a, and I don't quite know. We don't quite know what we're doing with all this, but it's baby steps. You're
trying.
We're moving forward.
Yeah. You're absolutely trying.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. All right, Rob, you said you were going to talk. You've talked a little bit. Do you have any questions in the chamber, or am I putting you on the spot?
No, you're not putting me on the spot. I don't have any questions. What I'm most thrilled about is being, quote, reacquainted with my cousin, and we've got all kinds of plans to compare, family notes and just kind of come back and figure out the Chenery stuff. I was cleaning out the garage a month or two ago, and my grandfather had the family coat of arms, and I sent it to Kate, and we started talking about that and everything. So I'm just excited to get to know my cousin more and do some fun stuff with that.
And you're both history folks?
Yeah,
yes.
Both history buffs.
So
yeah, and Rob helped out when we had our April 1, we had the big celebration when the statue first came to town on its first go-round, and Rob was instrumental in volunteering, and it's just fun. We're starting to, share the excitement of this whole thing.
I met other cousins
that
day.
Yep.
Kate knew and got invited, but I didn't know I had them. They're over near the Chesterfield.
Yep. Don Everhart and her. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and there's others.
Isn't that wild?
It's wild.
Crazy. Yeah.
It's wild.
You talk just about small world.
Yeah.
And I just have a personal interest in tracing back my family on both sides.
Yeah.
It's just cool to go through my mom and actually. I don't think there's a lot left on my dad's side, so it's kind of neat.
I think Kate has a lot of answers for you, I imagine.
She is, so.
Can we end with the question that we normally ask?
Yes, by all means.
Does that work?
I think so.
This question is a little weird. It doesn't play well as a transition, but here goes. Imagine you're a talk show host for one session, one episode. But it's your talk show. You get to figure out or determine who's going to be on your show. Your guests can be alive or dead. They can be friends, family, famous, maybe not so famous, and you never knew them, but they have a really intriguing story that you want to talk about. One female, one male. Musical act, could be soloist or band. And then if you're into comedy, who would your comedian be?
Oh, wow. Yeah. I hate these questions.
It's meant to be more revealing about who you are.
Well, I mean, there's so many amazing historical figures that you would think you'd really love to talk to, and I couldn't begin to isolate one. But I so wish I could talk to my grandfather. Because, I was 16 when he died, and I really didn't. Now I know so much more. Oh, my gosh, the questions I could ask. That would be fabulous. Now, as far as a woman, I don't know. Of course, is it because I'd want to talk to them, or they'd make a good talk show guest?
It's whatever you're going for.
Because some people would be really interesting, but they wouldn't be a great talk show guest. But I don't know. I would love to speak with Jane Austen. She's my favorite author. I just think that would be really fun. Who knows what she would say? And a musical. I don't know. I love Joni Mitchell.
Okay.
I think she would. Just her voice is so gorgeous. So anyway.
All right, there you go. Great answer.
Okay.
Yeah, I should have mentioned. Yeah, it can be for you. It can be for your audience.
Yeah,
it can be thought-provoking, fun, whatever you want it to be.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
You want to talk about your family, your kids at all?
Yeah, they're both academics. Their grandfather on their father's side was a professor, and my uncle's a professor, so we have a lot of academics. So Elena teaches history, believe it or not, at Union College in Schenectady, and Alice is in information science at Bryn Mawr outside of Philly.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, I'm very proud of them. They're great kids.
And near train lines that connect to Ashland.
I know. It's so great. Way better than having to get on an airplane and all that stuff.
Yeah, I'm totally with you.
Yeah, I can drive there. I'll probably see Alice next week, so that'll be great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Kate, I'm glad you live in Ashland. I'm glad you were willing to come over here. I'm glad you're related to Rob, and I really appreciate you doing this. You're fun and very informative.
Thank you so much. Well, as you can tell, I like talking about this stuff. Don't have to drag anything out of me.
It's kind of fun, right?
Yeah, it's really fun.
Yeah.
It's a great story. I mean, gosh, I'm so lucky to be able to talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun. So thank you for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to wherever you listen to podcasts. We'd also really appreciate if you'd rate and review us. You can find us at scodupodcast.com.